Good morning and welcome back. In 2007, Tracy Fullerton, director of the USC Game Innovation and 2015 Games for Change Game Changer recipient, began research on a project that would become Walden, a game, a first-person digital exploration of Henry David Thoreau's experiences while living at Walden Pond. Fast forward nearly 10 years later, and with funding in place from the National Endowment of the Humanities, Walden, a game, is well on its way towards completion and widespread distribution, where it's poised to engage generations both raised on the book and those coming to it fresh. Here is a sneak peek.
When I wrote the following pages, or rather the bulk of them, I lived alone in the woods, a mile from any neighbor, in a house which I had built myself on the shore of Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts, and earned my living by the labor of my hands only.
Big round of applause. That was beautiful. Here to talk with Tracy about the process of designing Walden and the challenges and opportunities of designing games in the humanities is William Adams, chairman of the National Endowment of the Humanities, and himself a PhD in the history of consciousness. Please help me give a warm welcome to Tracy and William.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to say what a great pleasure it is to be here in New York with Games for Change, and how grateful I am to be able to represent the endowment, and how proud we are that fellow alums of the University of California at Santa Cruz are here on the stage together. It's a great...
Go Banana Slug.
Yeah. The Banana Slug, by the way, is the mascot for the University of California, which is Santa Cruz, which will tell you something about its self-image. In any case, it's great to be here with you, and I wanted to start with maybe an obvious question, but one I know from talking to you has a sort of a complicated answer, and that's, why Walden? How did you come to have the ambition to create a game around this text of this extraordinarily interesting, complicated writer?
Yeah, it is a complicated answer because I think it's both a personal answer and a scholarly sort of research-oriented answer. And the personal answer is that my father made me read the book when I was young, and I, of course, read it in school and university, and I had a deep connection to it because of the many times that I'd returned to the book over the course of my life. And I found that at a particular moment, I was closing my company, and I was in a sort of moment of trying to re-understand my life. I had read it again for the umpteenth time at Walden Pond. And it came so strongly to me what an amazing experiment it was, and how the rules that he set for himself were much like a game. The first couple of chapters of the book are about sort of what his experiment is and what the rules of those experiments are, and then the rest of the book is an outpouring of what occurred during his time at the Woods. And I thought, being a game designer, that this was something that other people might like to play. And of course, we can't all go off to the woods. We don't have time in our busy lives to do that. And many students across the country read this in urban classrooms in places where they don't have a place of solitude and introspection. And it seemed to me a really wonderful project to try and give them that opportunity.
So once the idea became real in your mind, what was the process you went through, both as a research matter and in terms of gathering sort of resources and perspective on the work that helped you shape the nature and the work of the game itself?
Really, again, there's sort of a multiplicity of answers here. And the first thing I did was, in my lab, at the Game Innovation Lab, I have a core team of researchers and game developers who I went out and I bought copies of the book for them. And we started a reading club. And so at that time, every Wednesday morning, we would sit down and we would share ideas about the book. Everyone underlined and brought ideas about what that system was, what that sort of playful system that we could put together would consist of, so that what would emerge out of that playful system would be something akin to the experience that Thoreau had had. So we started this reading club, and we began this deep textual analysis ourselves. And then I wrote a letter, which I think I told you I was scared to send. I wrote a letter to Jeff Kramer at the Thoreau Institute at Walden Pond, and he's the chief curator there, and he's written so many books that deeply analyze the text and the journals. I wrote a letter, and I was afraid to send it. I kept it sort of in my inbox for a while, and then I finally sent it. And Jeff replied immediately. I thought, this guy's a Thoreau scholar. He's going to push back at me. You shouldn't make a game about that. And couldn't be further from the truth. He was so welcoming and warm, and immediately said, let's set up a call, and let's talk about it. And we had this wonderful discussion about what would Thoreau think about making this game. And he told me, he said, Thoreau was an inventor, and he made sure that his books were printed on the latest technologies, and he invented a new kind of pencil, a better kind of graphite mix for pencils. And he says, I think that, he might not have been a video game player, but he would have been curious, and he would have had a perspective on it, that's for sure.
So did your exploration of the scholarly resources pretty much focus on him and his work, or did you cast about more broadly? We
worked, we've shown iterations of the game to various scholars, including the people at the Concord Museum. One of the interesting things is the Concord Museum has the largest collection of Thoreauvian objects, if you will. So his desk and his snowshoes, his flute, he was a flute player, just all of these various objects of his life. And so we showed it to that group as well. And then there have been a number of other people. I was actually recently on a panel with a number of scholars, and we showed the game to them. So people have given us insight. One of the deepest insights I think that we had was a connection to the Huntington. It might seem weird that I was in California and I was making a game about Thoreau at Walden Pond, but as it turns out, and I did not actually know this when we started, all of the drafts of Walden are actually in Pasadena, just a stone's throw from USC, at the Huntington Library there. And we connected with the chair of the history department at USC, who turns out had a connection to Huntington, and we brought them in as advisors. And one of the most amazing things that they did was they allowed us access to those drafts of Walden. So the whole team got to go to the Huntington, take the long elevator down into the archives, and amidst all of this amazing history, this literature and history, we were able to actually see and read from the drafts of Walden, which is an incredibly moving experience.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking how fortunate and interestingly connective it is that we've supported the Huntington for, I don't know, 40 years probably at NEH, so this is another sort of nice.
It is. It's a. You know, all these things. We were talking a little bit about serendipity right before we walked on stage, and I think this project has had wonderful moments of serendipity, including finding out that those drafts of Walden were there, including the fact that Jeff Kramer was so welcoming, and that the Concord Library folks were so open to giving us critique and insight, including the fact that the NEH started this program in digital projects for the public, which hadn't existed before when we began this project.
Good.
There was no thought of that, right? And now these things come together at the right moment.
And you're helping teach us how to do this work and how it matters and why it matters and what the general audience is. So we're grateful for the relationship we have with you.
Well, I don't know if I'm teaching, but I'm at least.
Believe me,
I'm
you're
the
teaching.
first
You're teaching
penguin.
me, that's for sure.
I'm one of the first penguins on the edge there, going to go test the water, so we'll see what happens.
One of the things I find so interesting about this project, and you and I talked a little bit about it, is that for a sort of somebody new to this world of video games, I don't think of the video gaming world as one that is very contemplative, I guess, and sort of quietly contemplative. But you look at this text and lots of other things Thoreau wrote, and they are deeply contemplative. There's a kind of quietness to the reflection. And I just wonder how you coped with that and how you sort of grasped and projected that contemplativeness as you developed the game.
It's a really great question. Luckily, I actually have explored it before in other projects. And one of the interesting things about the genesis of this project, and I'll get to your answer, but the genesis of this project was actually in 2002 when I took that trip across the country and wound up at Walden reading the book in situ. And I remember writing in my journal that night that I thought that I would like to make a game about Walden, but I didn't know how. And I think it was because of exactly that question, because we hadn't yet explored this area of what I call reflective play. And it was after that I then went to USC and started the Game Innovation Lab and started working on projects that I think have led to this. So projects like Cloud and Flow and The Night Journey with Bill Viola are all stepping stones in a way to this. And they all explore this notion of play where the emotions of the player are given space to breathe. A lot of play that you're talking about is kind of rough and tumble play. And it's wonderful, and it's fun, and it's exhilarating, and you stop to breathe at the end. But I think there are other kinds of play where we can be breathing and thinking and reflecting as we experience it. And that's the kind of work that I'm interested in right now.
And I was noticing as we were waiting to come on, listening to the clip, the music is really helpful in this regard because having not seen the images while I was listening, I focused on the music in a way I hadn't when I first saw the clip with you a couple of weeks ago. And the music really is a significant element of this.
The music and the audio design done by Michael Sweet from Berkeley College, who's been my collaborator on many projects for 20 years. And this is another moment of serendipity, really, is that Michael, who I'd worked with most recently on The Night Journey, another spiritual and slow game, moved to Walden. He literally lives a stone's throw from Walden right now. And he moved there right at the same time I was asking him to work on the game with me. And it was this incredible moment of serendipity. And what happened was he actually wound up going out and recording all the birds and the insects and the wind, the water at Walden in situ. And what you hear in the game is a procedurally created soundscape that fits with our procedural landscape and changes depending on what time of day it is, what time of year it is, where you are standing, what trees you are standing in, because some birds like certain kinds of trees. And it always changes, and it's spatial. So as you move around the world, you can actually follow the calls of birds. And you're right, the music is a deep part of it, is integrated into the game mechanics, so that as you balance your time between sustaining yourself physically in the world and sustaining and growing your inspiration and your connection to the world, the music actually will grow more lush. As you fall out of balance, the voices of some of the instruments will fall out and the music becomes less rich. And it's a kind of positive feedback cycle towards maintaining that balance.
So this project is almost under your belt now. It's almost...
Oh, we are so close to content complete right now.
So I'm wondering what this has taught you working with a text like this and with a thinker like this, who is not, I would say not an easy thinker. What is now the potential for, and how do you think about next steps in terms of other projects like this that involve, these very substantial classical humanities figures and texts? What's next, and what do you think the potential is as you see this going out into other places?
It's such a large question. So, first of all, I've learned much personally as a game designer, as a scholar, and one of the things I've learned is not to be afraid to set out on a project without a destination. So that statement I made in my journal about I'd like to make this game but I don't know how remained true the day that I went out and bought those books and decided to embark. And that, that's pretty scary, right? And I think that what I've learned is if you trust in that process and you trust in the team and you trust in your own ability to continue to ask the right, interesting questions along the way, that you don't need to know the destination. You just need to trust in those questions leading you to interesting places. So, I would say that was a personal learning that I took away. And I also, I go back to that moment where I sent that letter to Jeff Kramer and I say, don't be afraid to reach out to people who might seem like they wouldn't encourage your journey. So that, there are amazing scholars. Jeff himself is not a digital media scholar. He's not, a gamer. And I think that many of the people that, Bill Deverell and Dan Lewis from the Huntington, none of these are gamers, and they are not versed in gaming. But I would say don't be afraid to involve them, because their experience and expertise will bring a richness to the project and the process of the project that you can't get if you are only bringing in people of your own domain, right? So bringing in those scholars, and don't be afraid. Don't think that they're going to laugh at you because you want to make a video game about a person who's many think of as a Luddite, right? Don't be afraid to do that. Bring them in and ask those questions, and people will be excited. It's a new frontier, and almost everyone is excited to be invited on a journey like this. So, to me, that's those are two forms of personal learning. I guess the last thing I would say about the potentials are great. First of all, because, and this is why I'm so happy that you guys have started this program. I literally was running through the hallways when I heard about this project, the program that you have. We have focused so much on education and on funding for education in STEM. in our society, and we have forgotten that you need to understand why you want to do science. That is where the humanities come in. And so the potential for this project and for others in the area that marry that seeking to understand why we are here with these new technologies and these new forms of digital media, digital play, we're literally the tip of the iceberg, right? So to me, there's huge potential.
As you say that, it seems to me that you're suggesting turning that new technology back on the question of meaning, really, which is what the humanities ultimately are about in most ways. Meaning in all kinds of different ways in parts of our lives, but in the end, it sort of comes down to meaning.
It does. And that's why you have to breathe when you play, right? The tagline for this game is play deliberately. It's obviously a play itself.
The other thing this brings to mind, and we were talking about it briefly as we waited, is the question of balance and balance in life. And as you talk about STEM, I think one of the things that worries me most about the contemporary life that we live is how, in some ways, fundamentally unbalanced it's becoming in various exclusive focal points that we live with, and certainly technology and STEM can be exclusive focal points. One of the illuminating things you said about Thoreau in this book is how one of the major big preoccupations of Thoreau in this book is balance. Mm-hmm. Seeing the world in a unified way and seeing the world in a balanced way, and how extraordinarily adept he was, not just at questions of meaning, but in the minute observational detail of the world that was in front of him.
And the layers of meaning, right? So in the book, in one instance, he'll be discussing, the precise way that a leaf is constructed and sort of cataloging the facts of that. And then he'll be layering on the blooming times of that plant. And then, within a page, he can be waxing philosophical about how that plant inspires a dawn or a new inspiration in him, a new feeling of connectedness to nature. And so to me, that synthesis of he's sort of citizen scientist, right? We would call
Very much,
him, and a citizen poet, and he marries those impulses in a synthesis that we have lost. We've lost the notion that it is as important to understand, why something works physically, as it is to understand what that means to us as humans, right? And I think that's a shame, and to me, it's one of the really beautiful things about the book, and I hope that also is somewhat interrogated as people go through and play it.
Well, I think one of the things that interests us and really motivated us to shape these programs, these digital programs for the public, including the gaming piece, is getting these worlds back into contact with one another, getting the world of STEM and digital technology back into touch with the humanities sources, which, as you said, kind of ground our experience and again, approach these deep questions of meaning.
Yeah. It's critically important, in my opinion. And there's a theme in the book that is related to this. There's another kind of balance. In addition to the sciences and the humanities, there's also this notion of the balance of human life, of the choices that you make in your life with your time. Time was something that was actually really important to Thoreau, and how we spend our time. And so, we have only so much time on this earth. And he was noticing that time at his moment was beginning to accelerate. That he calls it, we do everything in railroad fashion, right? And the telegraph and the railroad were speeding everything up. And I think that, it's one of the concerns people have when they look at a game like this and they say, oh, well, you're making a game about, a guy who didn't like the telegraph and the railroad. Well, he certainly wouldn't like digital technologies, right? But it wasn't that he didn't like them, right? It was that he thought we needed to really interrogate our use of them and how they affect our lives, right? And so I think, obviously, internet time and digital media time affect our lives deeply, and we need to ask the same questions he was asking, you know?
I know that you had a question you wanted to ask me in the few minutes we've got left.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking specifically about a game, and I'm a game designer, but I also wonder what you think when you look at the broader the span of the humanities and the intersection between digital media and technology and the humanities, and I wondered what your great hope and expectations and what you think is the most exciting new possibilities for the intersection between these digital media and technologies and the humanities.
I think the overarching spirit at the agency with respect to this technology and lots of others is that we want to follow and in some sense lead as well, but follow humanities content and take humanities content wherever it seems naturally to go. And particularly given these questions of balance and in our culture, I think we feel very strongly that the digital, the technological world, which is becoming so enormously important for us, is reconnected to some of these deep questions and resources of meaning in the humanities generally. So we feel very strongly, I think, that we want to connect humanities work and content and resources to all of these technological expressions to the degree that they're appropriate and that they can sort of use, in the best sense of that word, humanities content. And we're learning as we go. We're learning from people like you, right? Because I don't know that anybody's ever done anything like what you've done with Thoreau. And now I can see, I don't know, an infinite variety of these games on different people. So our work, I think, is to open the door and make possible support for projects that teach us how this technology can advance humanities content, particularly in this critical technological time. This is not a new thing at NEH. I was reminded by my colleagues that we've been doing digital work since 1967. In fact, we had an event at the University of Maryland a couple of weeks ago where we celebrated a very early grantee of ours from the 1970s who did some of the pioneering work in the development of hyperlinks. And he did it with an NEH grant.
Nice.
That wasn't to make hyperlinks, but it was part of the project and the process of the humanities work he was doing. So we've been at this for a long time. It's become more and more important to us over time, but again, we think that the humanities can live and be creatively exercised in all kinds of places. Documentary filmmaking is another place where we've done a lot of work. We're doing work in radio, and television, and now games. So
Exactly.
I think it's just a piece of this larger puzzle for us of how we connect meaningfully technology with humanities workers and humanities content in ways that benefit the country and benefit students and benefit institutions. So it's a big part of what we do, it's an important part of what we do, and it's an exciting part of what we do, and I'm grateful to you for giving us this momentum.
Well, the team is extremely grateful. This began as a labor of love, I should mention. So when I first told people about this game, when we had the reading club started in 2007, people just looked at me cross-eyed, and even my colleagues looked at me cross-eyed, and there was no money for it. So it was literally the Tom Sawyer method of getting a game produced, which is I made it look so cool, and people were like, "Oh, can we come work on that?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know, what can you bring, And to come really now, almost a decade later, which is crazy when I think about it, from those moments where I was literally having to convince people to come and work on it, full circle to the kind of support that we have now to finish the project and bring it to the public. It's an incredible moment of change, and it's really brilliant. I'd love it.
Well, we're glad to be there with you, and we're very grateful for your terrific work on this project, and we'll look forward to the next a monumental figure in the humanities that you can bring to the world through
Well, the
video games?
Yeah, the next one is actually the American Revolution. We're doing the American Revolution.
That's
so,
a small topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, thank you all very much. Thanks to Tracy for her great work.